Welcome to the Endless Entrepreneurs YouTube channel. My name is Luke Henson. This is episode number 2 of Reselling to Real Estate. Quick background on me. I am an eBay seller, a real estate investor, and I work as a consultant in the corporate finance world. I am very privileged and excited to have a special guest on tonight to talk about everything you'd want to know as it comes to short-term rentals and Airbnb. We have Richard Fertig here to join us, and he is actually in Jackson Hole, Wyoming right now, correct?
Absolutely.
There for business and pleasure. So he took the time out of his schedule to be here with us. So I'm very, very grateful for that. Hopefully you guys bring lots of good questions for him. I'm going to give a quick little background on him so you guys have some context. So he is a multifaceted entrepreneur, I'll call him. After speaking with him briefly, I was super, super impressed, well beyond anything I've ever accomplished. So I'm excited to be able to take some of this knowledge from you. But prior to launching Brilliant Transportation, Lifesaver Software, and his most recent venture, Short-Term Rental University, Richard was an associate at the Blackstone Group. He managed a $4 billion hedge fund at Ramius Capital LLC. That was based out of New York City. He also graduated from Cornell, which is my stomping grounds in upstate New York. He majored in psychology and economics, has his MBA in finance from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. So as you can see, I could probably keep going, but he has a very, very impressive resume to back up what he's going to bring, which is all his real estate investing expertise. Now, I'll let you take over and kind of tell me a little bit more in depth about yourself and how you got to this real estate world you're in now.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. And I really appreciate you having me on the show. And for those of you that have never seen or experienced any of the content that I've created, we have a YouTube channel, so head on over there. But I just got off the slopes, and so I'm a little bit between, clothing and outfits, so it might look a little bit different depending on where you are in the country. Right here in Jackson Hole, this is what everyone walks around in, and beanies and so on. But, I've been in finance, and I've been an entrepreneur pretty much my whole life. My father was an entrepreneur, and I was always drawn to real estate. There's something very real about the asset, owning a home, owning land, owning something that you can touch and feel. And what I did in finance was the exact opposite, right? It was all sort of like in the ether world, and you couldn't really touch it or do much. And we were literally killing each other for 1 basis point, 1/100%, right? Like my MBA versus this next MBA, and we were just really trying to be smarter and faster and so on. And I like to contrast that with all of my real estate holdings. I actually bought my first investment property while I still was a renter in New York City. I bought a property in Long Island in 1998, and I would rent that out seasonally. And that started a really successful investment career in real estate. And I've done just about everything there is to do in real estate in the last 20 years. I've bought, I've sold, I've built, I've flipped, I've been long-term landlord, I've 1031'd, I'm now doing things in my self-directed IRA. And out of all of this stuff, the thing that's most interesting to me, not only in those last 20 years, but I think on a go-forward basis, the most profitable, the most opportune is short-term rentals. It's a real game changer, much like Uber has disrupted, say, ground transportation or the taxi and limousine. Before Uber, there was a certain standard order of business, and then after Uber, the world changed. And I would say that the shift in real estate opportunities is the same. The amount of disruption that Airbnb and companies like Airbnb bring to the table is enormous. And so I've spent all of my time and energy in my own portfolio, which now numbers 6, but we're standing in number 7, and I have 2 other properties here in Jackson Hole, so that's 8 and 9. So we're quickly growing the real estate portfolio, all focused on short-term rentals, and I'm happy to tell you and or your audience anything I can to be helpful.
That's awesome. And as he mentioned earlier, and he briefly gave a very humble plug there, but he has a Short-Term Rental University, STR University. The link is below in the description. Definitely we'll dive into that later in the show, all the valuable content he's bringing there. But you definitely should check that out. Subscribe to it. Hit the little bell button so you get notifications when they come out new content. This has been an area that's been super interesting to me as I've started to shift into real estate, which is why this kind of connections is been developed. This relationship here is I have 1 property. I have 1 long-term rental, right? And he is diving into an area that I think there's a huge opportunity in, and I'm very green in it. I don't know a lot about. And so I'm hoping that through this interview, A, I'm going to learn a lot because I'm pretty selfish when it comes to who I interview because I want to learn. But B, again, the audience and people here will learn. We have a lot of resellers, and I was telling Richard this before. This reseller community is big. It's robust. We have a lot of really smart people that are either building their businesses in their spare time while working 9 to 5. Sometimes of them are full timers. Some of them are already in real estate and balancing both. But the general feeling in the reseller community is everyone's willing to hustle, and this is one of those areas where hustle just wins. And so I'm just really excited to kick that off here. So I'm going to jump right into the first question because you touched on a lot that you've tried every type of real estate basically, right? You've ventured into each area. You've had different businesses. You still have a bunch of different businesses, all these streams of income. But why now is short? I know you talk about the disruption, but for you, what is the biggest advantage for focusing on short-term rentals right now for you in this stage of the career with everything you have in play?
Sure. So I started a company called Brilliant Transportation in 2010, and it was a very high-end take on ground transportation. I introduced the world to what was happening, which was these Mercedes Sprinters, and then I decked them out for super luxury, and we were disrupted by Uber. We didn't have any problems with our clients per se, but keeping our chauffeurs, there was a lot of demand for chauffeurs, and they started going to work for Uber. And as I started to think about my businesses on a go-forward basis, I really wanted to be on the innovation curve. I wanted to be ahead of the wave and not be swept up in it or behind. So one of the things that I really think is important about short-term rental investing is there is a massive change of behavior. And what I mean by that is 20 years ago, people would never consider staying in someone's home or allowing them to stay in their home. 20 years forward from now, that's going to be the absolute norm. Every single person is going to buy every single home with the concept of a spare bedroom, a room over the attic, or renting it out when they go to somebody's wedding. And for the weekend, instead of them paying out of pocket to fly to Austin, Texas, they're going to put their home, it's going to rent for the weekend. That money is going to pay for their trip to Texas. So it may sound a little bit outlandish, but trust me, it's happening. And so very similar, and I don't suggest that I know nearly as much as any of your audience about reselling, but fundamentally there's an arbitrage. What you guys do is you find mispriced items, the real value, and then you list them and try and extract that arbitrage opportunity. There is a current real estate arbitrage opportunity in the short-term rental space. I don't know how long it will last. I think it'll last 5, 10, 15 years, but there's a mispricing. People are pricing all real estate based on the utility that it brings you. So Richard likes this place and it's got this view and I'll pay this amount for it. Or the commercial real estate value, which is the unit commands $1,000 per month. That's the way real estate is priced today. Guys like me are going in and buying as much real estate as we possibly can as quickly as possible because I believe that there's a multiple of value there. So what we're seeing today is apartments that rent for, say, $1,000 a month. If you short-term rental it properly, you're getting about $2,500 per month or $3,000 per month. So it's 2.5 to 3x the long-term market. And yet the real estate prices that you can buy real estate at today don't incorporate that.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you just framed that specific way because the first episode of just this entire series that started was talking about the arbitrage that we have as resellers, which is identifying undervalued assets and reselling them for that margin. And the same thing as in real estate is you're always identifying an undervalued asset in a way that you can utilize it that someone else doesn't see. And I've always been in that one-track mind of kind of the long-term rental. So it was okay, well, just like you said, it rents at X per month. I've only ever analyzed properties that way. And
right.
We had a phone call a couple weeks ago, and I all of a sudden started looking up condos here in Charlotte, looking up the daily and the weekend rates versus the daily rates and the weekday rates and stuff. And I started doing some of the math, and I was like, man, just at a high level, you were spot on as far as the opportunity. And it's interesting that you comparing it to Uber and kind of this window we have to take advantage of it. And I think that's really true because people are starting to adjust. Uber is being adjusted, right? There's competition there. Airbnb even has competition. But the real estate market itself really hasn't course adjusted for the purchase price of the real estate yet for
That's right. That's right. And then also from the rental perspective. And so, the way that I like to describe it to somebody who doesn't really know, what it is that I do or why I do it, it's really easy. I say, I try and find properties that I personally like, right? So in areas that I like or locations that I like, things that I like, because that helps me stay focused and grounded to it. And then I let other people pay for it. Other people buy my property. And then the beautiful thing about real estate is that you get a mortgage, call it a 30-year mortgage or a 15-year mortgage. So other people come and stay at my place. I can only be in one place at a time. I just told you I have 9. So I can only be in one place at a time. The other 8 are basically being paid for, and the mortgage payment and the utilities and all that, somebody else is paying for. And so at the end of, I use 15-year mortgages as much as I can. At the end of 15 years, I own this asset outright. Other people have paid for it. It's likely appreciated in value, and I've been paid the whole time. So there's no other business that I'm aware of where you can say all of those things.
I was muted. Whoops. Yeah, that's. I mean,
I thought you were speechless.
Yeah, no, that's exactly the mindset I've had. As far as property goes, and I think a lot of people here have the same type of mindset when they're thinking long term. Is how do I leverage my time the best? And and we've talked about a lot on here, is like reselling is transactional. Like unless you hire out a staff and a building and you scale it more like a big operation, it's going to be very transactional to I find it, I sell it, I find it, I sell it, I find it, I sell it. Your model is I find it, I rent it, and then eventually I own it, and I'm getting equity and cash flow the entire time. So that's it's much more, and it's not, I don't like using the word passive, but it's more passive than something transactional like reselling.
Well, I think that that's very true, but I think that the differentiation is this has a long-term goal, right? And it has a long-term reward. So if I do this successfully for 15 years or 20 years or 30 years, and that's a really long time horizon for people that are like flipping things, whether it's stocks or thrift stuff, to start thinking about 15, 20 or 30 years is mind-boggling. But if you stop and look at, I think, the wealthiest person on the planet today, and you take a look at his perspective on time, Jeff Bezos at Amazon, right? Like he looks out in the terms of decades and quarter centuries, right? He's building a 10-year clock. So if we just take a look at time arbitrage and say, there could be a real advantage if I focus instead of on the short term and the immediate fix and making $10, how about let me start focusing on 20 years from now? What does my life look like by design 20 years forward? And real estate is hugely important in that.
No, absolutely. I completely agree with everything you just said. And we got some questions here in the chat, and we might grab a couple as we go.
Cool.
But I'm gonna table the couple right now. So Aaron, I see your question there. We will get to it, I promise. I'm gonna jump into the next question I have here. We have a rough outline we're following. As you guys know who've watched my show, I don't follow outlines very well to the end, but we'll see how we go here. So as far as like a first time or a first experience in real estate investing, do you think that short-term rentals is a way you should go for your first time, or do you think that you should ease into some of these other ways and then do it? Like, what is your thought process there? And I hope people in the chat have said, man, it sounds really risky. What's your thought process around that?
So I think that getting started with short-term rentals is probably the single easiest and fastest way to do it. And I'll give you an example. Charles, who worked behind the scenes and got us, connected, you and I, he started filming some of my content. He worked for me at Brilliant Transportation, and we started to create some of this short-term rental content. And he said to me, hey, do you think that this would work for my place? Now he rents. And I said, of course it would work. And he had all the standard list of doubts that everyone else has. He's like, but it's only a 1-bedroom, and I have to walk up 4 flights of stairs, and it's a fold out, like all the stuff, right? And it's all insecurity. So we've all faced it. And I said, listen, you elect to live there, and so do your neighbors, and they walk up the same 4 floors. And as soon as you move out of the place, someone else is going to rent it. So there's clearly demand. And not only that, try it, like rent the roof over your head. And in his particular case, he wanted to do it when he was there. So he shares his space with people that live in his living room. But you could also do it, when you're away. It depends on, it's a very personal thing. But my point is, I think Charles's entire investment was less than $1,000. And he's made multiples of that. And now he and his wife are thinking about buying their first investment property with a short-term rental component, where before I'm not sure they were necessarily thinking about buying at all. And so it's just a really easy, quick way to get started. You don't have to commit a lot of time or money, And, you know, it takes a certain type of person. You have to have some hospitality. You have to like people. You have to be able to work through, you know, people that are less than happy. There's just, you know, there's certain challenges that come with it. And there's a lot of people that do it really, really well. And there's some people that say, you know what, this isn't for me. So I wouldn't go out and buy, like, you know, a huge home as an investment to try it, but get started with the roof over your own head.
I think that's great advice. I think that you hit on two things that kind of struck a chord with me. Is one, right? You have things in your possession, and even in Charles' example, he didn't even own it, right?
Right.
You didn't have to own it. Where you reside, depending on HOA rules or, you know, some various other things, if there's no restriction to it, like, try it and see if you like it. And similar, I did something with a long-term space. Was I bought a house and I lived in it with the intent that I was going to rent it when I was done. So,
right.
You know, another passive, easier way, a little less risky to get into it. And I think you hit it dead on is, yeah, you got to have some hospitality. You got to have some personality. And what's the worst that happens is you don't like it and you just don't do it anymore, right? Like,
yeah, and we spend a lot of time over on the YouTube channel that we've created talking about, you know, figuring out your why you're doing this. And I'll just be very direct with your entire audience, save everyone a lot of time. If you're only doing this for money, use of your time. If you enjoy being social and meeting new people and people sending you, you know, really nice notes and leaving you gifts and making money, then you'll deal with some of the hiccups along the way. You know, some people that say not so nice things, for instance. But if it's just purely money, I don't know anybody that can do it for 20 years for the money, right? Like, everyone quits jobs and moves and does stuff. And this is no different. But if you're looking for a great way to accumulate long-term wealth that you can do as a side gig and be very profitable, it's an excellent way to get started.
Oh, that's great. And Melissa in the chat actually just brought up, so kind of piggybacking on what you just said, she said they have a 3-unit rental property and they're thinking of Airbnb in one of the units. And, you know, that's a perfect example of a way to kind of dip into it. Is you already have a rental property with multiple units, you know, try using one of the units as more of a short time. You know, maybe when a lease expires and you haven't backfilled the tenant, maybe try out doing the short-term rental piece with that side with Airbnb and see how it goes. I think that's another excellent way, if you already are in the game a little bit, to try and test that out.
I've never met Melissa, but I bet you if we come back to Melissa a year from now, all 3 of her properties will be short-term rental.
All right. I'm putting that on the record. So, Melissa, we are going to circle back with you on this one. There's another question. And I'm going to table that. No TV, I see your question. We'll hit that in a little bit. But I want to keep moving through the outline here, and we will definitely get to that. All right, so here's kind of what I always ask people when I'm trying to learn about new stuff is, and it's more of just the precautionary, and I think I can probably resonate with a lot of my audience with a little more risk stuff. Is like, so if you can name 3 pitfalls, like 3 things that as you jump in it, you try it for the first time, hey, maybe you're going to rent out your couch or whatever, you're going to rent out a bedroom. What are the 3 like big things to avoid or to make sure like you're tackling before you jump in?
So one, I think it's really important. We see this all the time with new people. They take everything very personally, and you know, a negative review, probably like on your eBay listing or whatever, you know, like, you never want that. You never embrace it. You're never happy about it, but like, it's going to happen. You know, it's just going to happen. And so recognizing that you can't control everything all the time and giving yourself a little bit of, you know, freedom, I think is really important. Another thing I would say is, you know, I think a lot of people really strive for perfection, and taking a page out of Gary Vaynerchuk's book, like, just get started. If you don't have the perfect couch and the perfect this and the perfect that, like, that's okay. Just price it accordingly. Deliver great value and great hospitality and a great experience at a lower price point, and then build to that. But get started. There's a lot of learning and a lot of lessons to benefit from by launching. And so, like, even on our Facebook group, where we have thousands of people and hosts and so on, people are like, oh, I'm not going to launch yet. I'm waiting for this and I'm waiting for that. And I'll say, just launch it, reduce the price a little bit. And then the comments comes back like, oh my God, I've just rented my first place and I got an extra $1,000. And I'm like, well, that $1,000 goes a long way. You can reinvest it. It helps buy the couch. So that's the second thing I would say is, you know, don't wait for perfection, just get started. And then the third thing I would say is, you know, try and create an experience. I think the thing that many new Airbnb people try to do is rent the space, right? Like, they think that they're selling the space, and the space is pretty much generic. What is differentiating somebody from a beginner to like an expert is the pros and the photos and selling the dream. And so instead of just putting a photo of, you know, your place in San Diego and it's like, here's this and here's this and here's this, and then you expect people to say, well, I want all that, I'll take it. You know, paint the dream and show photos of a full cup of coffee in the morning with the paper and the view, or a glass of wine and cheese and crackers. And then in the pros, say things like, this is a great place to relax and unwind after the convention. And then include some testimonial things. People always leave reviews. Use those things. Like, I had a great day after the convention. I came home and there was a bottle of wine. Just sell the dream and put yourself ahead, because probably very similar to eBay, a lot of people think it's really straightforward, and it is. But the people that do it well, that know what they're doing, kick ass. And the people that don't know what they're doing say like, it's not that great. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, I think a lot of the eBayers right now, or even Amazon people, can definitely relate to that last one. Is, you know, the difference in a quality listing with a good title, good photos, you know, all the things ticked off, and make, you know, and crafting that story of my same used item is the same as 17 other sellers, but mine looks a heck of a lot better. It's presented a lot better, and it sells for a lot higher and a lot quicker.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. We also see that. That's probably the fourth thing I would say. We see people getting started, not charging nearly enough, not thinking that they're worth it. They don't charge a cleaning fee. They do all the work, and they're just not being profitable. And I have a very different strategy. I like to be the most expensive property online at any like location, and I'm comfortable sitting vacant, right? Like, right. I know what my worth is, and I don't look at it number. That's the other thing. A lot of people look at occupancy rate. That's their success metric. Like, I got 100%, so I got the same as long term. Right. Well, I would never want 100%. 100% means that I've priced too low, right. And also I'm doing the most amount of work. There's the most wear and tear on my unit. I would much rather be priced higher and 75% occupancy with 25% downtime. I can do repairs. The place doesn't have a lot of damage, and I'm making more money. So just look at your return on a monthly basis, or even better, on a yearly basis, instead of saying, well, I had a really crap month and a really great month, and I don't like the variability. Just take a look at a 12-month snapshot. You'll likely find you're making 2.5 to 3 times what you would do if you had a long-term rental.
And that's dead on, even from the reselling space. I've talked a lot about on my channel, and one of my models this year is trying to raise my average sale price per item. And for the same reason, right, is the amount of back-end work that goes into every time you rent that, right? The cleaning, you know, the process, the property management, whatever it is that you're putting into it. Same for eBay, the amount of sourcing that many more items, the prep time, the pictures, the photos, all that stuff, right? Like, it takes more time for me. And if I can sell half the items for double the price and do less work, that's a win. So
exactly.
Yeah,
and it's also reputational, right? So like, right. you have reviews, we have reviews. So there's a lot of similarities and a lot of similar characteristics and traits that likely somebody who's successful reselling would be successful on Airbnb, from like the marketing perspective, from the trust perspective, from the pricing perspective. So I think there's a lot of similarities, and I would love nothing more than, you know, I don't know, half a dozen, 100 of your users that have never really listed Airbnb, go create an account and try it.
Well, yeah, and we'll talk a little bit later in the show, but so Shannon and I are definitely targeting we've talked about this a little bit, as a beach condo later this year, and planning the same exact thing. So, but I do want to address, so a lot of questions that have come through, they've been similarly themed, and it's really around the amount of work and effort that goes in, and you kind of open the door really nicely there, to executing and running the Airbnb business with a property, especially if it's not a property you live in. So let's say, like, you know, for instance, the property you're at right now, and you're doing. So what are, like, describe to me the different moving pieces that go into executing that on a month, for a month. Let's just say for a month. What are all the inputs that you are managing, dealing with, the kind of rough costs around them, you know, percentage wise? You don't have to give these specific dollars, but.
Sure. Yeah. No. Well, look, I would say that I'm at a slightly different stage than somebody who's just getting started. And so I'm going to paint the picture to tell you where you could go if this is working well for you. But I literally have everything outsourced and automated. And so it takes very little of my time or energy. I can't tell you who's staying in which location, when they check in, when they check out, when the cleaning team is coming, or even how much I made. It's all dynamic pricing. So just like your seat on an airplane your price might be different than the guy to the left of you or the guy to the right of you, or hotels. It changes every single day based on inventory, supply, demand, events. So I have very little insight as to what's actually happening, because what I've created is a system that I've automated entirely, and I have all these different properties all across the country, and I have teams that I've put in place locally. So you may not get there when you're launching, and then it is a little bit of work, but I would say this. I think it's really important when you start to do everything yourself initially. Clean. Figure out like what that means. Take a look at the reviews. If people say it wasn't quite clean enough, again, don't take it personally. Start to look and see what was not clean and how is it. And only once you have that personal knowledge can you then train somebody else to do it, and then ensure that they do it to your level. But ultimately, unless you really like cleaning, for instance, outsource it, because your goal here is to last for 20 years. If you don't like cleaning your place and scrubbing the toilet and the tub, you're never going to do it for 20 years. But you can find somebody who really does like that. And I have my cleaning lady, Pilar. She's been with me for 20 years. Like, she's a machine and she loves it. So find yourself a Pilar, pay her whatever it costs, because it's a pass-through expense. And now you have the cleanest place, 5-star reviews for cleaning. She's making money, and you're happy because you're not doing it. So I try and encourage people to do everything in Italy, and then try and outsource that you don't like.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So then let's go the opposite route. So let's kind of back into something that's just starting off, right? So let's just use my example. So I'm gonna buy a condo in the fall. Somewhere on the beach. So because I'm not near there, right, and so I can't necessarily do the cleaning and all that stuff myself. What do you recommend? Because I know that's what a lot of the people are asking. Similar to you, right? I might want to buy a vacation home and dual purpose it, right? What is your recommended route there as far as taking care of those necessities on a monthly basis? Is that seek a property management firm? Is it a seek multiple firms? Is that a
So the easiest way to get started and the turnkey solution is to hire a property management firm. The challenge there is that they're taking all of your profit. You're going to pay them between 30 and 40% of your bookings for them to handle all of the work. And so while it's going to offset your mortgage and get you closer to where you want to be, you can outsource all that yourself and keep all that profit, right? They're not doing it at a loss. They're doing it at a profit. So therefore, I would rather profit myself. And so what I've done at every location that I have is I find my own cleaner, my own plumber, my own electrician, and then I have a Google Doc. I have somebody like a virtual assistant now who manages all my different properties and all my different calendars. And I've trained them so that if there's an issue with plumbing or whatever, they know who to contact. They check in with me when it's above a certain price point, but we try and get them in there as quickly as possible. And this is maybe a little bit different than the resellers. I don't know how big or small they are or how commercial, but I want to be the best employer possible, right? So for like the cleaning lady that I use in your condo on the beach, I want to pay her more than anyone else, right? And the reason I want to do that is so that she stays with me, she cleans best, I'm her first obligation, and it's sustainable. Everything I try and do is about sustainability and repeatability, so that I don't have to like constantly be finding and training new cleaning people. And then the other thing about Airbnb, for instance, is make a profit on the cleaning. So if she charges $20 an hour, which I think is sort of a going rate across America, charge $25 an hour.
Right.
Like, why not? And you will find that people will pay it. People want a really clean place, so a higher cleaning fee denotes like it's going to be more clean. Now they're going to hold you to those expectations, so you have to deliver. But all things being equal, I would personally not select a place that has a very low cleaning fee because I want it to be clean.
Right. So that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. And I think even from an eBay perspective, and I know it's not a one-for-one in reselling, but I know a lot of the audience, like everyone, the goal for a lot of resellers, they want to scale. Like that's a very popular topic in our community. How do you scale what is often referred to as an unscalable business, right? When you're a solopreneur, you're growing, you're sourcing by yourself, you're listing by yourself, you're executing every step. Is what are ways that you can source them? one of the things that actually very, very recently, just in the last couple of weeks, I've started to do is I've outsourced a lot of my photography and my measurements and descriptions to other people locally. And like you said, you're creating that win-win dynamic. And for me, I'm helping other resellers. It's a win-win. They're just starting out, so they get to learn through the process. I can teach them. It, kind of helps me in that. And I think it's that same approach of what are the areas that you can outsource to free up your time so that you still are making money, you're still enjoying the process, and you're not doing the things that maybe you don't have time to do anymore as it grows. So I think those are
right. And if you think about it, what you're basically creating is a brand, right?
Right.
So somebody will pay $1 more or $10 more to buy from you with your brand and your trust and your reputation. And that $10 you can then pay for the photography and right, like you can build in higher margin and outsource it as long as you deliver the quality. It's the same thing on the Airbnb side. We encourage people to get to that superhost status as quickly as possible. We teach you how to do it. We suggest that you price low. You try and find people that are like-minded. You tell them, listen, I know you're getting a great deal, but here's why. I want to find people that are really great, and I want to host really great people, and I want to make sure I get a really great review. And you start to build your business. Just consider it a cost of doing business and a marketing opportunity cost. But in doing that, you'll get your first 10 reviews really quickly. They'll all be 5-star. Then you're at the superhost status. Then you start to increase your prices because you have trust and credibility. And it's a formula.
No, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. I'm going to take this question. I'm looking at let's take this now. So someone asked a really interesting question earlier. And it was more of like a hypothetical, like what would you do type of question. And they said, what's your advice for a 21-year-old who has $40,000 and a decent credit score? Advice in regards to getting mortgage loans from banks. It's pretty open-ended, but I guess I'm going to take it more as a direction if we want to answer it of how do you recommend they proceed if they're trying to get into real estate investing or short-term rentals with that situation?
So look, I think $40,000 at age 21, you're off to a great start. So first off, congratulations. Second off, I think that there's a lot of different things that you can do with that $40,000. And as we talked about in the introduction, I used to be a professional investor. I ran a $4 billion portfolio. And so there's a very strong interest in my personal life to invest in stocks and bonds and businesses and so on and so forth. That said, if you're drawn to real estate, I think it's probably the single most important thing that you can own. And own for the long term, and it appreciates over time. There's some characteristics in real estate that I would encourage you to think about, such as like demographic trends. If you can find a place not at the outskirts that you hope becomes like a hot, trendy spot, but for instance, I bought a home in Fairhope, Alabama, of all places. And Fairhope, Alabama, for those of you that don't know, first off, it's gorgeous, so I like going there. But second off, it's about an hour away from Mobile. And if you take a look at the demographics of Mobile, you have all sorts of aerospace companies, international companies. Alabama's really doing a lot of tax-friendly things. And as a consequence, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of middle-class jobs are created. And these middle-class jobs, they like to do things on the weekend, like rent my home, right? So just try and think about where you make that first investment. And I think that if you do that, you will do really well with a short-term rental there. It'll cash flow much more than a long-term, and you'll take that cash flow and expand. You'll get a second one, a third one. A lot of our viewers on the YouTube channel and in our Facebook group have purchased multiple properties where they thought they were starting with an experiment. Now they've bought second and third properties. They're quitting their jobs. I mean, the difference between real estate, I think, and perhaps reselling is that the dollar amounts are much larger, right? You can buy a $100,000 home or $1 million home. I guess you could resell $1 million piece of art, but that's probably not the core of what you guys are doing.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that I think that's the biggest barrier to entry in people's minds typically, from flipping from more the reselling mindset to the real estate is, I know personally, and this, I don't want to overgeneralize, but how I got into reselling was I had very limited capital, right? I had not a lot of things to do, like not a lot of money to invest in anything. So I was looking for a way to generate capital. And for me, I could find things cheap at garage sales, wherever, start flipping them and building and kind of snowballing it. So for me, my mindset used to be lowest buy cost possible to highest, profit margin. And now over the last, 4 or 5 years, it's kind of evolved because I've just reinvested everything. And now I'm getting to the point of, okay, I'm looking at the higher price things that have maybe a longer return, a bigger return, create wealth instead of just transactional, cash, things like that. And so it's just it's kind of a flow of your mindset and what you're trying to fit the need for in your life. And I think everyone's at a different phase. So I totally agree with you, though, that that price point ends up being a lot of the big barrier to entry. And it's just interesting, very interesting.
Yeah, I think if you just take a step back and think of some of the wealthiest people that you know, or the wealthiest people in the world, there's a startling statistic, and I'm not going to get it right, but directionally I'm correct. It's something like 98% of millionaires own real estate. And 98% of millionaires don't own gold. 98% of millionaires don't own bonds. 98% of real estate, of millionaires don't own Bitcoin. So the fact that there's this commonality, like they can live in it, they can use it, it appreciates, there's great tax benefits. It's one of the most tax efficient investments you can make. So as you start to grow your business, you have to start to think about, expense management and being a smart business person. It's a really great way to get started. So if you're 21 and you have $40,000 and you like real estate, I think it's a great way to get started. You'll be able to get financing as a first-time home buyer, and just take your time. You're in no rush, but find the right spot, because that first investment is kind of important.
Yeah, definitely. That was a great answer. I'm going to throw another one that's been a theme in the chat here, is what to do about the different licenses or rules state by state as it pertains to short-term rentals. Maybe just give like your overall take on it, your approach to it. It sounds like you have properties in all sorts of states. How have you handled learning about those different laws, dealing with those conducting business, et cetera?
Yeah. So again, since we're trying to build a business that's going to survive and grow over decades, it's really important that you play by the rules and you know what the rules are. And what I tell a lot of people that are just getting started, they always say, "Oh, I can't do it. Like my condo doesn't allow it, or my city doesn't allow it." And I'm like, well, pick one that does allow it. There's no rule that says it has to be in your backyard or it has to be the one you currently have. Like, figure it out. Find a place that has a great opportunity and make that investment. So I think that rules and regulation get a lot of negative press, and I kind of always try and have a variant perception. I try and view things differently than others, and I think that's a competitive advantage. So for me, rules and regulations are my friend. I search for them, and a place that has a clearly defined rule allows me to know what the rules are. I can determine whether I can be profitable under those rules, and then I just adhere to them, and so I'm sustainable. So the place that I'm in right now in Jackson, Wyoming, for instance, they have very strict zoning about what's available for short-term renting, and there's very few of them. But the ones that are allowed to be short-term rental, like the ones I'm only interested in buying those properties, you have to get a permit, you have to pay tax. These are really good indicators when you're looking for a property that the town, the county, the state, the condo, whatever, is relying on that income for something, right? They're not just taking all this tax money and putting it aside and they have this huge surplus. They're building roads, they're paying for schools or whatever. That spigot is really hard to turn off. Once they become reliant on like the taxable income or the permit income or the whatever, chances are it's going to be there forever. And so I would encourage you to, instead of finding a place that has no rules and regulations and it's just sort of the Wild West, if you're just getting started, try and find a place where it's clearly defined, make sure you can adhere to them, and then just play within the rules.
I think that's excellent advice, because you're almost flipping the model on its head, right? You're saying this limitation is actually my market indicator.
Exactly.
Right. This is speaking volumes to the demand, and the fact that this is a good, that's almost a proof of concept for you, right? When you're trying to decide, is this a profitable area to purchase in? Well, of course it is. If they have built budgets in their local governments off of the ability to Airbnb the short-term rentals, there's obviously a good supply coming in there, or at least there's demand for people who want to rent it. So, you being one of the people that owns the few houses in those tight zones, that's probably a pretty good thing for you.
And this goes back to what I said when we first started the conversation, which is that there's a mispricing. Because what I find is, the town of Jackson, for instance, has been here for 100 years or so in rental real estate, and everything that we know has been here. But the people that have done real estate historically here, they don't understand this short-term rental thing. Like, they may have stayed in an Airbnb, maybe even they've put their place on it, but they don't understand the business component of it and what that means and why that that zoning is worth so much more. It's kind of like this, just so that we're all get on the same page. If you could buy a restaurant in the same exact location that does not have a liquor license, or you could buy one in the exact same location, all things being equal, and it has a liquor license, wouldn't you pay more for the liquor license? So for me, I'm buying properties that have this short-term zoning, but nobody's pricing it. Right. So I'll buy those all day long.
Yeah, that makes a lot. That's a great comparison too. I like that a lot. All right, so I'm gonna keep rolling here. Guys, as you have questions, start dropping them in. We'll probably the back half of the show here. We're gonna start to use this Q&A. I still have a couple more questions for him, but feel free to drop them in there as they come up, and we will get to them. So I want to switch gears here, and I want you to talk a little bit more about short-term rental university, which is, that's your channel. And, I'm so grateful that you took the time out of your schedule to come on to my channel. And I really want to kind of give the platform here to talk about the value and what you guys have been working on, because I've been consuming a lot of the content since I've met you, and it's been very helpful to me. And so I just want to give you the platform to just talk about the vision and how it was created, what you guys have been up to. I mean, this is your floor. Shameless plug. Give the audience, let them know what you're doing, because I think it's really important. I don't endorse a lot of things, but the stuff that you're bringing is very, very valuable. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I don't know that I'm going to do a full-scale endorsement, but what I will say is this. The way that this whole concept came about was because my ex-wife and I started buying properties, and we started with long-term rentals, as we talked about, and then I said, let's try the short-term rental, and it worked. And it worked really well, and we enjoyed it, and the cash flow was great. And so then we started to dream a little bit bigger and say, well, we really want a ski house, but we can't afford a ski house. We probably can only ski 1 week a year or 2 weeks a year. But the short-term rental thing was working. We said, well, why don't we short-term rent it 51 or 50 weeks a year, and we'll take that money. And then that worked really well. And then we said, we want a beach house. And so we just kept designing our life around where we wanted to have properties, and other people were buying them for us. And that was sort of like what we did. But when people would ask us at a cocktail party, or, I just met somebody on a lift line, what do you do? Or I would tell them, I buy properties in locations where I want to retire and I want to spend more time, and I have other people buy them by short-term renting it. And everyone was like, oh my God, like the light bulb went off, right? And so Charles and I started talking about it. I said, we have this concept. I think we can help a lot of people grow, themselves and grow into entrepreneurs and grow real estate empires. And we thought a YouTube channel would be the right way to go. I'm probably the oldest YouTuber out there, but it is what it is. And we just got started. We launched, and we've had a lot of success in the following sense. It brings me great pride and joy when people say I did this or I accomplished that, or, using Charles again as an example, his goal was to pay for his honeymoon. No, his wedding. His goal was to pay for his wedding doing Airbnb. And he did that really quickly. He paid for his wedding, and then he paid for his honeymoon. And so that's really exciting for me to tell people what I know, what mistakes I've made, what I've learned along the way, how to do it. And so the YouTube channel has just taken off. We create content at least 3 times a week. We have a Facebook group also named Short-Term Rental University. I think we have about 7,000 people that are there and contribute daily and ask questions. Here's the one thing I want to say. Unlike many of other Facebook groups, we really have a very positive mindset and a positive outlook on life. So it's not a place where we go and rant and belittle and bemoan. And it's not a complain session. We're there to learn. We're there to be supportive. We're going to be critical and forthright, but I think one of the things that we really take pride in is that community, and we're all sort of positive mindset and can-do attitude, and we're there to learn.
That's fantastic, and I just want to really drive home that last point you made there. And Charles and we've kind of, I don't know, it's been probably a year or so of going back and forth. He's watched my channel. We exchanged messages on Instagram. And positive is a really good way to describe, Charles, myself, and you. And, when I started interacting with you and Charles introduced us, and, one thing on my channel is I only do positivity. I don't do drama. I don't do negativity. I feel like it's a complete waste of time because you only have so much time. Exactly. So I think that's one of the best things that you just said there. When you talk about the Facebook group and the rants, it's there are a lot of those out there. There's a lot of negative Facebook groups out there. So it's good to hear that is the way, you guys is a very positive spin one. And I would encourage anyone watching, just go check it out. I mean, if it's not something you're interested in, that's fine. But if real estate isn't interested in you and you're not sure which direction you want to go, especially, I think you should. I mean, up until our recent couple conversations, like I was dead set and I was buying properties in Charlotte to rent out long-term, 12-month leases, just slowly accumulate. And, I've really rethought that. And when you just talked about kind of modeling your lifestyle, right? Like you basically modeled the business to your lifestyle. That was what reselling was when I first started. In this real estate, when I was thinking long-term, long-term rentals, it doesn't necessarily model to you as well as what short-term rentals can for you, right? Like you're buying an experience and an investment at the same time, which there's not a lot of things out there that allow you to do that.
No, that's exactly right. And not only that, because the cash flow is so much stronger than the long-term, you can actually grow much quicker. Now, there's a point in time, and I don't know if it's 5 years from now or 10 years from now, where everything will normalize, right? Like right now is just a very good opportunity. But if you're buying the right property for the right reason in the right location, you'll be thrilled to own it 10 years from now, and chances are it will have appreciated. But I just want to be really clear, just like in anything else, 10 years forward, that gap will narrow. You'll no longer be getting 3 times or 2.5 times. Maybe you'll get 2, maybe you'll get 1.5. You'll still get paid more than long-term rentals because it is more effort.
Right.
So like just natural market dynamics, you will get paid more. But right now you're getting paid way more than you should.
Well, there's a good question in the chat, and I'll kind of take a swag at it just because I think it's both, right? And he said, how do you protect yourself from getting overextended? And this goes back to, this is going to be real estate related, any business related thing, right? And one of the things I advocate all the time is when you're reselling, when you first start your business, you should not be relying on that for your income to pay your bills and the things that you do, right? Like, so for me, I've always said, you start your business, you snowball it and you grow it. And if it gets to a point where it replaces your income or it can exceed it, then you make that decision. Just like I would approach this the same way. And you can give whatever advice you want, Richard, but start as it's something on the side and be very conservative with your approach, right? You can run the numbers and you can have a threshold that you say, if I'm not making this multiple, I'm not comfortable, because if the market crashes tomorrow and people stop luxury spending on trips and stuff, I want to make sure that I'm still safely coming in above my expenses versus planning on it being a 3x multiple all the time every year for the next 15 years, right? There are ways to be conservative with your approach, your formulas, the way you analyze things, to make sure that with the ebbs and flows of the market and the spending that you're not getting crushed. But I'll let you jump in. I know I just kind of word vomited there.
Yeah, no. Look, I have a very different take and mindset than I think many. And so this may resonate with some and it may turn others off. I'm not really sure. But generally speaking, in that variant perception advice that I was talking about earlier, I like to do the things that most people don't like, right? So if somebody views something as risky and therefore most people don't do it, I want to spend time there and I want to circle and I want to understand, I want to get comfortable, but like that's the opportunity, right? So even Warren Buffett came out and said something, and I've been saying this for a long, long time, whether it's my girlfriend or my kids or Charles or anybody, people think bonds are safe. Bonds are safer than stocks. I've been saying for the longest time, I think bonds are much more risky without any return versus stocks in today's market at today's prices. So what the masses think is necessarily safe or risky, take a look at the other side. And so I agree with you. I wouldn't want anybody to be overextended. I wouldn't want somebody to do something imprudent. But I think that if you can find the ability to say, I like taking the other side of the bet, right? Like I want to be the casino, right? I want to be the guy who understands the odds, who's looking at the stuff. Most people wouldn't want to be the casino and like just not get the excitement, just deal, right? But that's the business opportunity. So long story short, I like taking the other side of the trade. When I get paid properly, I want to do that. And it's kind of like insurance. We all pay $100 a week or a month for car insurance. And if we ever get in an accident, we're like, wow, they just cut me a check for $1,200. Well, guess what? You've been paying $1,200 a year for the last 15 years and never got in an accident. So I would rather sell insurance, right?
Right. No. And actually, I pretty much wholeheartedly agree with everything you said there. Where I was trying to drill home, and we talk a lot about in kind of this community, is taking calculated risk.
Right.
All right. And it's you have X amount of dollars available at your disposal. You have X amount of responsibilities that are like, I have to pay this versus, well, it'd be nice to have this. And there's a big gray margin there that you get to play with. And, one of the ways we talk about scaling all the time, I've mentioned before, is people want to start bulk buying. Well, bulk buying costs more capital, right? I go to the thrift store and I can buy things for $1, $2, $3, $4 all day long and return my money 3, 4, 10, 20x sometimes, right? But when you start bulk buying, you're paying more per unit a lot of times, which sounds weird, but usually you're paying for higher quality, newer tech stuff, and a higher price point and a lower profit margin, right? But you don't have to take the time to go source it and do all these other things that is you're paying for time essentially to scale, which is everything you keep describing, right? Is you're extending yourself into areas people don't want to deal with so that you can have the advantage and that extra margin to play in. So
yeah, and then I think also at the same time when you talk about calculated risk, I really believe in taking a few like really foolish bets, right? Just like if somebody's going to pay me 100 to 1 for something, I'll put $1 on it.
Yeah,
right.
And that's calculated in my mind. Right?
It's calculated, but it's like I fully expect to lose the $1. Yeah. But if for whatever reason I win, I get the 100 or so. To talk about something that's a little bit more current today, it's the same sort of thing with Bitcoin. Whether you understand Bitcoin or not, I tell anyone who will listen to me, put whatever amount you can afford to lose, like totally comfortable. It could be $10, it could be $100, it could be $1,000. It doesn't really matter. But put that minimum amount in, get a toehold, because now all of a sudden, instead of reading the headlines and ignoring them, you'll read the headlines, you'll be learning. You might lose your $10, but that $10 could turn into 100. And so like that's a place where the downside is really, really limited. The upside is unlimited because you could learn. You could learn, you know, a ton that you wouldn't otherwise do. And then also it could appreciate, right? Like the price of Bitcoin could go many times higher.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, you referenced Gary Vaynerchuk earlier, which is pretty much, he's my all-time favorite content producer. Just, I mean, there is not a whole lot he says that I disagree with. But one of the things that he but he talks about and he models his businesses, he has throwaway money that he puts at stuff that he has a feeling about, and there's a higher chance it's not going to pan out than it is. Right. But he continually does that so that when it does, he's there and he's in that space. And that's an investment for when it springs. So just like that 1 to 100, right? If I'm continually doing it and eventually it's going to hit, right? It could be hit really big. And so I think that, again, it comes back to that calculated risk. I think we're saying the same things. It's cool. Getting in that mindset. So I think that's awesome. I'm going to see if anyone's got any other questions here, or otherwise we'll start to wrap up here, guys. I've really enjoyed the time. I've learned a lot. Is there anything else you really want to leave the viewers with? And people watching, you know, whether it be about the content you have to offer or just in general philosophy, you know, something you want to leave with them?
Yeah, no, I think that the, you know, come to the YouTube channel, Short Term Rental University. There's, I don't know, hundreds of videos that we've created. It's all free content. Consume it at your pace. What we find oftentimes is that people will get started. They'll watch 1 or 2, and then they'll like binge watch, and then they'll do it, and then they'll get a second place. And so, you know, if that sounds interesting or exciting, you come check it out. There's no reason not to. But I think the message that I would leave to people is the world is changing. The way that we, you know, travel is changing. The way that we're living is changing. And I encourage people to try and be ahead of that curve, personally, like how you live and how you spend your money. So go stay at some Airbnbs. You know, go check them out. How do you like them? Is it a good value, a bad value? Is it a good experience? Is it a bad experience? What could you do better? What do you learn from each one of these, right? So there's a lot of opportunity, and I think that most people sort of shy away because it's too risky. I don't know. It's a lot of work, whatever it is. But once again, if you're getting compensated to do it and you're a hustler, like, why wouldn't you?
Absolutely. I think that's fantastic. There's actually one question I do want to take real fast. I just rolled it. And it's the same person asked the scenario question, being 21 with a 40K. He said, what if banks are not as willing to give me a mortgage because I'm 21 and I have a low income record? That's an interesting question. I don't personally have a lot of experience with this, so I don't think I'm comfortable giving advice on it, but I'll throw it to you in case you are.
So what I would say is that mortgage underwriting standards have changed a lot in the last decade. So you're probably, unfortunately, born in the wrong era. There's not as much flexibility. That said, you know, until you get 100 no's, keep knocking on different banks' doors and try different banks and different bank types. Go to what are those things called? Savings and loan. Go to what is that other one, Charles? Didn't you have a bank? I forget what it was called. credit union,
Yep.
go to a commercial bank, try and get a commercial loan. I mean, just keep going. You will find somebody who believes in you. If you don't find a commercial bank that believes in you, partner with friends, partner with families, ask your boss. I mean, just get creative, because if you have a good investment opportunity and you can articulate it wisely, like you know your stuff, there's somebody who has capital that wants to back you.
Yeah. I that's great advice. I mean, I know very little about that space. I do know that there's a lot of options for getting money, but they usually come at a much higher rate
Right.
than you would traditional mortgages. So, but yeah, that's good advice, and I'm glad we could give you some sort of advice. Sorry that I can't give any more, but it's not really my area of expertise. I don't want to go out on a limb there.
The other thing that I would just say, as people are thinking about getting mortgages, is pay really close attention to your credit score. Get an app from like Experian or something, monitor your credit score, learn what goes into your credit score, improve your credit score. Don't just show up at the bank and be surprised that your credit's not great. Like, go to the bank with a great credit score that they can believe and trust. So even if you don't have a lot of income, you can have a great credit score.
Right. No, that's great advice. And I know from a reseller perspective, I guess I'll give this one advice on credit is a lot of resellers have gotten the trap, not trap, it's a viable option, but interest-free credit cards have become such a thing now, right? It's so easy to get interest-free credit cards for 18 months, 24 months. And a lot of times as resellers, we'll use them, especially during hot times like Q4, things like that when inventory is really going, and we'll max out cards to buy inventory with, and then we take a long time to pay them back because they're interest-free. We just throw a little installments at them. We kind of finance it. And kind of the whole thing there is that actually slowly erodes your credit while you're doing it. And I actually found this out a little bit because I've always had great credit. Didn't realize I had financed a couple things on it with inventory purchases, whatever. It really wasn't paying attention. I mean, could have paid it, but just didn't, was just paying it a little bit at a time because cash flow I thought was more important. But having that extended credit and having balances not overdue, but just having balances in general in your ratios, it can really impact your credit score. So just be careful as resellers. I think a lot of us do that as a source of capital, is basically interest-free capital. Just use it strategically and monitor your credit score. I think that's great advice. There is a super chat here, though, from Krillin. Krillin is one of our regular viewers. He's donated $2 to the chat. Thank you very much for that, Krillin. He says, don't hang up yet, which tells me he has a question. You have time for one more question if he drops one?
Absolutely.
All right, we will wait and see if Krillin drops one here. Let's see. Sometimes it takes a little bit for the chat to catch up, so I do want to give Krillin a chance, though. He contributes a lot to this community, the reseller community. He's a long-time reseller, lots of expertise, quite the regular, but yeah, it was funny to talk the credit score stuff. I was doing some refinancing of my current property, and I'm like, I had really, really good credit when I bought my first property and hadn't really checked it since I went through the mortgage process like 2 years ago. And then she's like, you gotta work on that a little bit. I was like, what? And so I think you're dead on with that. I'm watching it very closely now.
Yeah, unfortunately, people watch it too late, right? Like, you want to start to watch it, monitor, and work on it long before you need to.
Oh, Melissa asked a great question. Sorry, Melissa, I didn't mean to miss that. While waiting for Krillin, she said, do you suggest property managers for Airbnb? And I think you kind of answered that earlier, but I'll let you kind of just quickly answer that one more time.
So what I would say is the following. If the difference between you getting started is like you don't want to do it yourself and the only way you would do it is to hire a property manager, as long as the cash flow is okay for you, don't forget they're taking the vast majority of your profit. But if that's what's going to take for you to buy that property, then I would encourage you to use a property manager. If you're running it like a business, then eliminate the middleman and keep the profit for yourself and learn what goes into it. Come watch the videos. We'll teach you exactly what to do. But I don't believe in saying, well, I don't want to do property management, so I'm not going to do it at all, and I won't buy that property. Buy real estate, hold it for a long time. Historically, you come out ahead.
Yeah, and that's great advice. I know you hit on it earlier. And the other thing is, and I'm just thinking from my mindset of I'm going to buy a condo here, beach condo in the fall, is I may use property management at the beginning just to get it purchased and get it rolling, but then I may take the time to start to make those connections so that I can part it out and ease off of the property management. And don't, like you said, don't let property management be the reason you don't. Like, just start with them, and then you can always ease off and start building those relationships as you spend more time with the property and you learn the community and you network. Like, that stuff takes time. You have to go and actually meet with people and understand what they do. Krillin just asked this question, dropped in. He said, what is the best way to translate regulatory policies in a municipality? He says he lives on Long Island and policy is very murky.
Yeah, I think Long Island is actually quite challenging, and they have pretty strict rules against short-term rentals in many areas. You can still do them, but you have to have a minimum term. So I think it's like 30 days. But this isn't a case in point where I would say there's no rule that you have to do this in your backyard, right? Like you can do this somewhere where it's completely legal and just have a pure investment property. Like for instance, and this is where I say like people, we get in our own way. We just believe like what everyone says and fear and so on. But you could buy Facebook stock and you would never be able to influence Facebook or Mark Zuckerberg or the business or anything, but yet you would buy Facebook stock. But for your real estate purchase, like we've been taught that it must be in an area that you know really well and maybe you have to live there and so on. But why can't you just buy a piece of real estate somewhere where it's perfectly legal, just like you would buy Facebook stock?
Right. No, that's a good perspective. And I think Krillin is really, I think Krillin lives in Long Island. And sorry, Krillin, if I'm wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure he does. So I'm guessing he was trying to see if he can either Airbnb something in his home or things like that. Well, and probably trying to confirm whether he's above water with what he's doing and how to best do that, I think.
Right. Well, look, if you've got a property that you currently own and you live there, that's a different set of circumstances, and each county or whatever is going to have its own body, but it should be readily available. And if it's not, really clear whether it's perfectly legal or illegal, then just figure out your risk tolerance. Like it's fine to have a cost of doing business, right? Like if you get a fine for $100, but you made 1,000, okay, you know what I mean? But it's a personal decision. If it's really against the rules, I wouldn't encourage you to do it. That doesn't seem safe, but try and find a place where it's really encouraged and taxed and the rules are clear that you can do it.
Yeah. And this is actually, we're going to do one more. This will be the last one, guys, but this is really interesting from Melissa. Just a follow-up to her last question is, she said she has the property with 3 units, and 2 of them are currently rented out long-term leases with a property manager. And what her question really is should she use the property manager she currently has to do the Airbnb for the 3rd one, or should she do the 3rd one herself? My initial answer would be if you have the time to do the Airbnb piece yourself to learn it, you should do that. If you don't, then maybe the property manager is the way to go to kind of dip your toes in the water. What do you think?
Well, look, again, I would say do whatever is the path of least resistance to get you started. I clearly think you should be doing it yourself and learning, and I think you'll convert from 1 to all 3 being short-term. I would also give you this suggestion. A lot of people that are historically long-term biased don't understand short-term, and they don't understand the hospitality and the turnover and the cleanliness, and it's a different skill set. It might be real estate and it might be renting out condos, but what you're trying to do is create like a brand on Airbnb, and there might be a good solution in the interim. There's co-hosts. Airbnb now has created a whole freelance platform where somebody can manage the calendar, can respond to all the stuff and do the check-in and so on and so forth, and they take a smaller percentage than the traditional property managers. Traditional property managers are legacy, sort of like dinosaur people. They've been thinking about doing things the same way for decades, and they're being disrupted by Airbnb and co-hosts and solopreneurs and people that want to do it themselves and profit from it. So I'm not a huge fan of property managers because I think they think a little bit differently, and that's a generalization. I'm sure there's some great property managers and some great short-term property managers, but in general, you're going into a new space, and you want somebody who sort of gets it.
No, that makes sense. I mean, it's almost like there's even that middle ground of almost like a Fiverr, right, where you just have each individual service you can subcontract out, and there's a platform to even find them now.
Right.
So, yeah. That's great. Well, I really appreciate it. We got to wrap up. I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're on business. You are skiing a little bit is what Charles tells me, but you are there for business as well. I mean, that's the whole lifestyle, right? That's why you do it.
It's the whole package. For me, there is no real line of demarcation between business and pleasure. If it's not pleasurable, I don't do it.
Right? I like that. I like that. Well, give it a big thumbs up on the way out, guys. Please go over to Short Term Rental University. Check it out. At least give it a go. Watch some of the content. It might not be for you, and that's fine. But don't say you didn't check it out to see if it's something that could open up a door for you. Appreciate the support as always. We'll be back later this week. Episode 3 will probably be next week with a new guest. And I really, really appreciate your time, Richard. Thank you.
Awesome. It's my pleasure. Good luck, everyone. Happy hosting.
See you guys.